Hello everyone, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to Ultimate General Civil War, and we are returning to our Confederate Let's Play series, in which we're playing through the Grand Campaign as the Confederacy. My General D.H. Butcher is in command of the 1st Corps, a fully built-out corps with a majority of units equipped with rifles. There's one brand new division that has some smooth bores, but in general this division is fully equipped with rifles. It has some 60 guns, and it is going into battle in the Battle of Malvern Hill, which you're going to see right here in front of you. Now, this video is going to be a little bit different than my usual Ultimate General Civil War videos, and that should already be apparent by the fact that I am racing my troops south, not because I'm double-quicking them, because I'm not, but rather because I'm playing this game on more or less hyperspeed. I didn't have a lot of time to play a battle through, but I did want to get one in. It's been a little while since my last battle, and so I decided, you know what? I'll just record it and see what happens. I had intended to stream, but because I'm a Packers fan and also someone who enjoys misery, I watched the entire Green Bay Packers-Detroit Lions game, which was a punishment to watch, and so didn't have a ton of time to play, but still wanted to get something in, and so that's what you see here in front of you. As you can see here, I'm playing on fast time. I don't think I play the whole battle through on fast time, just sort of the early phases. And what I'm doing here is I'm bringing my core forward and really focusing on two pockets. In the Battle of Malvern Hill, if you remember your history, Malvern Hill I don't think is captured in this game the way it probably should be historically. The battlefield may be somewhat accurate, but it doesn't really do justice to the terrain. Historically, at the Battle of Malvern Hill, the Confederates assaulted the Union up a sort of gently sloping hill. The Union had guns lined along the hill, over 100 field pieces, sort of wheel to wheel up this hillside, and the Confederates attacked and were butchered, and very much a Pickett's Charge style attack in 1862 at the culmination of the 7 Days Campaign. However, in this game, there's a nice little shaded wood on the right flank. The Union on the left flank are in an open, in earthwork in the open, that you can use a nice little wooded terrain as well to sort of shield yourself. So what I'm doing here, and you can see my 2nd Corps is now arriving on the field, what I'm doing here is I'm simply bringing up my corps, putting the majority of the units on the right and left flank, putting sort of a token force in the center to keep those troops busy, but really just overwhelming the Union defenses on the right flank, which are in a sort of exposed position in this wooded area where we can bring overwhelming fire against them. And then on the left flank, likewise, the bulk of the Union troops are deployed behind the line, not providing any sort of supporting fire, and 2 of my brigades can come up here covered in this wood line. So it doesn't really give a sense of the futility of the Battle of Malvern Hill in the same sense as happened in reality. In this particular case, it wasn't really a thing. I also believe the Battle of Malvern Hill, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that was the fight where the quote came out that it wasn't war, it was murder, in reference to the futile Confederate assaults. I believe it was D.H. Hill, Confederate division commander, who was quoted as saying that. But I think that's where that quote came from. Anyway, you can see here we're through the first phase. Our 2nd Corps is coming on. I just kind of give them general orders to march to the center of the line. But we're through the early phase of the battle. We've driven the Federals from the woods on the right. We've driven them from their early earthworks on the left. And we're now beginning to try and turn the Federal positions. Now, this is going to be a really bloody battle. It is not going to be a battle for the faint of heart. I think it's already apparent here that will be the case. Now, my troops on the right are shielded a bit because of this wood, so not only did we drive the Yankees out, but we've also got them in the open, more or less, with our own troops in this wooded terrain to give them some cover, so that should work out nicely. Meanwhile, you can see here my 2nd Corps starting to come up. Meanwhile, on the left flank, our troops are more in the open, but the Yankees have their troops kind of spread out a little bit more, so we've got 3 brigades, for example, firing there on 1 Union brigade, which is now retreating, and we're going to continue moving up on the left, trying to isolate individual Federal brigades so that we can turn them. We've broken their left in a way. We've pushed their left back in any way. We may not have broken it yet. To relatively limited cost, a couple hundred troops. 1 brigade did suffer kind of heavily. but we've driven several Federal brigades back. You can see them founding a new line a little bit further back, but it's far enough back that now we can bring two of these three brigades that were sort of overwhelming the Federal left to shift more toward the center. Meanwhile, as we've driven the Yankees back, they've sort of reformed their right flank, or actually their left, their right, our left. And our wooded troops here are starting to suffer a bit. They're not getting as much cover from the woods as I would hope. These Yankee troops are being a little bit more stubborn, and the artillery and their entrenched troops sort of in the center of their line are lending a little bit of weight so that our assault is meeting with a bit more resistance. You can see here the enemy artillery is firing canister fire into us, and I'm trying and struggling a bit, but trying to shift my infantry troops' fire to focus on the artillery first and the infantry second. The infantry takes longer to drive back, but it's more of an even fight when you're shooting amongst each other. The artillery, however, if they're firing canister fire into you while you're trying to deal with infantry and you're not responding to that canister fire, that will devastate you, and you really need to address that. So you can see here I've advanced that one brigade a little bit further left, shifted the rest of my attack on the left side of the screen here more toward the center, and the Yankees have a couple of brigades sort of ineffectually positioned with their own troops blocking their field of fire, while we have 3 or 4 brigades sort of firing more continuously and more effectively on isolated Yankee brigades. You can see this one brigade here. We're grouping several brigades against this brigade here. It looks like Robinson's brigade, getting multiple brigades to fire into it, while it's only able to return fire against a single one of our brigades. And you can see its manpower melting away, and now they're routing or being driven back. So we're going to continue to try and do that up the entire line so we can break their position in the center, take this first Malvern Hill objective, I believe it's northern Malvern Hill, and then continue driving southwards. Meanwhile, our second corps, our reinforcements, are starting to come up here. You can see these fresh 2,000-man brigades coming up as we've now broken the Yankee center. They're driven back from their defensive positions, and now we can use these additional 20,000 reinforcements to continue driving south, because Malvern Hill does have multiple objectives, and the first line of defenses is cracked, but we are now driving southwards. Now, southern, as we move south on the map, it does feel a little bit more like the historical battlefield. Things really open up. There's a lot less cover. There's a lot less earthworks. And maybe, and I don't know the battlefield well enough, maybe that's where the historical Confederate attack occurred over. Because I do know the Confederates sort of set up their own artillery along this sort of heights that was a little bit weaker than the main Federal positions. But the way this battle develops, you almost never see the historical Confederate fruitless charges across open terrain, which, now that I think about it, is very clearly the terrain the Yankees are now in, is sort of this open and exposed position. But again, in this game, you never see that battle occur, because what happens is you drive the Yankees back from their first defensive positions, and rather than withdraw all the way back to the second line of defense, which you'll be able to see here on the screen now, we're getting sort of an update saying, all right, you've taken the first position, you need to push the Yankees back. Well, we've got these 2 additional objectives that are in the rear of the map, but rather than the AI pull their troops back to those positions, which are incredibly strong if they do decide to defend them, they stay in the open, and they make this more of a slugfest between 2 roughly equal opponents, the Confederates and the Union troops, in open ground, with the advantage that the human player is the obviously generally the more intelligent player. But you can see that wide open ground leading into some wooded areas where the objectives are, and yet rather than fall back and execute an effective defense in depth, the enemy just keeps slugging away. You shoved me off my defensive position into inferior ground. Well, I'm going to keep holding this line and take the casualties as they may come, which noble fighter mentality, I suppose, but not very smart, if you will. The majority of the Second Corps is now up and sort of taking over large parts of the offensive. The First Corps is continuing to join them. I can't remember if I talked in the last video about my Second Corps, but my First Corps is all rifles with one division being an exception. My Second Corps is all smoothbores with one division being an exception, and that division having superb 1855 Harper's Ferries, in 1855 Springfield rifles that were largely captured from the Federals. So we've got a largely green Second Corps and a more experienced First Corps now joined in tandem. Altogether, when at 100% strength, they have about 46,000 soldiers between them. I want to say the Yankees had slightly more than that for this particular battle. But really, at this point, this battle just kind of becomes a slugfest. We've got two armies kind of sitting in the middle in the open. The Federals are going to give me a bit of a headache here. On the right, you can see three Yankee batteries of artillery, all dug in, well, maybe not dug in, but all located in this wooded terrain here on my flank. On the right side of the screen here, we've got two brigades trying to cross this bridge, but again, there's a fourth Federal battery of artillery kind of contesting that. There's some infantry back there as well. But these four batteries start ripping canister fire into my flanks and really dealing some effective punishment against these infantry troops, which are out in the open, trying to fire back, trying to follow my own advice from a few minutes ago, trying to deal with the artillery first before they have to deal with the infantry. The problem is these enemy guns are located in wooded terrain, and my shots aren't very effective, so we shoot, we kill a few, we don't drive them off, then the enemy fires canister, and the entire pattern repeats itself. So I'm going to struggle a bit. I will drive them off eventually, spoiler alert, but it does take a bit of time. Meanwhile, on the left side of the screen, the Yankee infantry hasn't really come back, so that does still give us an opportunity to flank this line. I slowly move troops in and kind of topple one regiment after another on that flank as I bring these troops forward, but I am very careful to maintain a cohesive front all the way between these two rivers that we're advancing in. We've got the one creek/river on the right, and we've got another one on the left. And our entire advance is being funneled between those forces. Really, at this moment, the tricky part of this battle is on the right flank, less because of the infantry, more because of the artillery, although you do see there are a couple of enemy infantry brigades here. We don't have sufficient infantry on our own. Meanwhile, I've also brought up some of my own artillery to hopefully play a decisive role in breaking up any Yankee counterattacks. Behind our front line of infantry, they're shielded from enemy attacks, while they can also still rip canister fire into the enemy at close range in the same way that the enemy artillery is doing to me. Meanwhile, I'm not pressing as hard as I could. Here on the left, you can see we've driven one, and we've got another enemy infantry brigade charging us, actually two charging our forward brigade here of Hexamer's brigade. But you can see here we've got two Yankee infantry brigades up front here, and then it looks like they've got some cavalry here and some skirmishers on the left flank that are trying to deal with Hines' brigade, as well as an infantry brigade. So that little exposed flank has kind of been steadied up. They're moving some additional infantry brigades here. Just as it felt like we were starting to break through on the left, they've pulled in some reserves as well. Meanwhile, our advance on the right is being held up by those guns. As I kind of scope the map out, we've got an hour 46 left, trying to scope the map out to figure out, where we have an opportunity perhaps to advance, and roughly how much time we have to do it, given the limited nature of time in this kind of a battle where you can only fight up to a certain length and you have to achieve all your objectives. The objectives in this battle are pretty far to the south. It's not an easy rush to the objective. You've got to kind of keep the pressure up. You can't really dilly-dally, and that's what I'm trying to ensure here. Meanwhile, our attack on the right's really petered out. We've got a couple of brigades left, but for the most part, they've all been driven back by this strong enemy artillery. So I'm kind of going back through some of my units in the rear to get some of those guys who had fought and not fared so well earlier and retreated, get them up to the front line. Meanwhile, in the center, a lot of the Yankee infantry sort of melted away, but they have a few batteries there, so I'm going to try and press hard there as well to keep up the pressure and keep the movement south toward those objectives. Keep it rolling on. It's actually kind of interesting when you look at this battlefield here. The right flank is all heavy artillery, and sort of the center is kind of non-existent or artillery here as we're moving around. But on the left, almost all of the Federal infantry is really giving us a rough time and inflicting quite a few casualties on us. This is one of the things I think this game does a really good job of capturing, is that difficulty in maintaining the momentum of an offensive. So, we've pushed the Federals back off their initial position. We received additional reinforcements. We had a lot of men. And as we attack, certain units are driven back. We lose some of the impetus behind some of our attacks. Two units end up, one in front of the other when previously they had been side to side. And what you see developing is a less effective attack. Instead of 3 brigades, on the left side of the screen here, you've got 1 brigade in front of the other. Instead of 3 brigades all side by side, you've got 2 brigades with one being able to fire and the other being blocked, at least until the melee happens. This is about to happen here. So you lose some of that steam. Units get intermingled, as casualties mount, gaps open up in your lines. And that really makes it difficult, especially in a battle like this, where you really need to keep the pressure moving. You really need to keep driving south the entire length of the battle. It really makes this kind of a fight really challenging. Now, fortunately, in this scenario on the left, we did have that 1 brigade, actually 2 brigades of ours, driven back by that federal charge, but we had 3 brigades just behind it, all in good order, all in good lines, ready to fire volleys as soon as the opportunity presented, and they did, and they drove back that Yankee infantry brigade. But nonetheless, I think this is one of those battles that does a good job of really demonstrating the challenge of maintaining an offensive, and you also kind of gaining understanding of why in battles like the Wilderness, in battles like Chancellorsville, commanders going forward, trying to get a clearer picture in their mind, Longstreet and Jackson, for example, moving forward, trying to gain a picture in their mind of what the battlefield looked like, and yet they're struck down on accident by their own troops in the confusion. It often seems like, well, why are so many generals getting shot by their own men in this particular war? Or why are they getting, in the case of Kearney, why are they accidentally riding into the lines of the enemy? Well, that happens when you have confusing, swirling fights like this, and you start to mix in, darkness as the sun starts going down. And not happening in this battle, but just a general comment about Civil War battles. Meanwhile, it feels like we've broken their right flank entirely, or our right flank. Oh my goodness, I'm so turned about with us attacking south. The Union right flank on the right side of the map feels like it's broken. I don't see any infantry units there beyond, the 1,500-man brigade and Carr's brigade behind that. It feels like their right flank is open. So I am going to go ahead and send a few infantry brigades far around to the right to that objective, because we are down to an hour, and we've got a ways to still drive the Yankees here on the left and center, and it feels like we're not in as good a shape there with these 3 infantry brigades. I guess one of them is a skirmisher, all firing volleys into us point blank. Our brigades front and back not having the best field of fire, blocking each other. It feels like our attack on the sort of center-south objective may be in danger, but all we have to do here in this battle is make sure we don't lose more than 55% of our total army, and also make sure that we take one of these 2 remaining objectives. So with the apparent lack of enemy strength on the right, now that we've dealt with the bulk of their artillery and really driven off the bulk of their artillery, it feels like really what we should be doing is just focusing on that right objective, get that objective, and then maintain the army and not, don't take any unnecessary casualties. I do just want to take this moment to apologize as well about the audio, guys. I know the battlefield doesn't have any audio coming back from it. That's because I had my mic on by mistake, capturing random musings and whatnot, but I wasn't really talking to the game or the stream or anything because, it wasn't a streamed game. So I do apologize for that. Certainly something I'll make sure doesn't happen next time, but for this battle, as you've seen to this point, there is no gameplay audio, which adds a lot of ambiance, right? Like to hear muskets and things like that firing in the background is always kind of nice. Instead, all you have is my silky smooth voice and the images from the game itself. But enough with that. I'm trying again to get these troops on my right flank to that objective on the right. I'm almost there. Some of my troops kind of got held up because they had enemy troops in range. You can see, for example, is it Calth or Wraith's brigade had an enemy infantry unit in range, so it decided I'm going to go ahead and stop and engage, when really I just wanted them to sweep wide right and take that objective, now that we're down to 50 minutes. With the retreat of the other infantry brigade, we've now driven Carr's brigade back as well, so we're sort of attempting to roll up the Yankee line right to left across the map here, at least on the right flank, where it feels like we've got a reasonable amount of strength relative to what the Yankees have in place. You've got this one brigade, is it Birney's brigade, that's kind of sitting in the middle and just taking fire and giving fire back, about 900 men, but he's got a artillery battery behind him, which is, again, a concern. That's the biggest fear of mine, is anytime you've got an enemy artillery battery, you've got to deal with that first, and I don't do a terribly good job of doing that here in this circumstance. Meanwhile, trying to bring some of our reserves up, I let my artillery fall behind, kind of stopped becoming terribly useful when it was firing at long range rather than coming up close and being something that I could utilize. So Trying to bring that forward here. I don't think it'll really matter for the remainder of the battle, but it is what it is, I guess. Meanwhile, on the far left, you can see the Enfield, or I believe that was the Enfield Brigade, got driven back by a lone Yankee infantry brigade, under 1,000 men, so not really a serious threat, but certainly is at least a spoiling action that's going to delay us a bit. Meanwhile, a couple of infantry brigades are charging. It looks like Vilmer's brigade here, so we don't have a lot of troops in support to fire into them. That's kind of the golden rule, is if you're going to get drawn into melee engagement, always have a couple of infantry brigades around them, because the enemy infantry can't shoot at you while they're in melee, but your brigades adjacent and behind of the melee can fire and are given a free field of fire, which seems faulty when you think about it. Like, just fire a volley into these troops and, none of them will magically hit your own troops, even though they're all engaged in close quarter combat, and all of your volleys will hit the enemy at point blank range. Okay, great. That's a little bit gamey and weird, but it is what it is. Meanwhile, on the left flank, we've got the bulk of our brigades still, also where the bulk of the enemy infantry brigades are located, and we're continuing to try and drive south here toward these objectives. We do have the one, and it seems pretty safe, but that other objective here is a little bit out of reach still, so going to kind of only 29 game minutes left, not minutes of this video, obviously, but game minutes left. I've already more or less won the battle. I've got the one objective, either the west or east Malvern Hill, obtained. I haven't lost 55% of my army, and I've taken North Malvern Hill, but I'm going to try and get that second Malvern Hill objective, because I'm not quite sure how close I am to losing half of my army, roughly, but it doesn't feel safe. So I'll take the extra casualties, which, ironically enough, will put me at greater risk of failing because of the loss of casualties, in an effort to assure the victory by taking that second objective point here further to the south. It is still a ways, though. Again, only 23 game minutes left, so we'll see. This sort of grind of a battle of slowly push them back feels more in tune with late Civil War rather than 1862 or even World War I trench warfare. But it is what it is as we try and drive south here. I get a little bit aggressive trying to push forward some of these brigades and break this federal line. The other thing is these guys are all in a wooded defensive position. We're attacking through open fields, through open farming fields, and the enemy is all going to be more or less either in that sort of house patch just to the east of the woods or in actual wooded terrain. So they're going to be more costly to assault, which again goes against our objective of maintaining our army. But when you play with the moniker of the Butcher, you don't have much choice. I'm just taking a look around to see, well, I captured the one brigade, but I did leave my commanders and my supply wagons behind. You can see several of my brigades have the white little ammo marker popping up saying they're low on ammo. Not a ton. This has been a pretty quick battle thus far, but some of them are. And I've also left a couple units behind, which at this point it's so far gone, I'm not even bothering to bring them forward. But you can see I left a couple of artillery batteries in the rear. I think my cavalry brigade is supposed to be somewhere here around here as well, and I may have left that also. Melting this federal brigade away with like 5 brigades firing into its flank in front, so that's good. But again, all of this is taking time. You can see this other Yankee brigade just charged our flank, the flank of Race's brigade, but was driven back by the brigades in support behind him on the left. I've got a couple of brigades sort of stacked up on the far left that I think are a little bit less effectual, but we've created a bit of a salient, driven in the right of the line to take and secure the objective on the right, going for the objective in the center. With the enemy troops, appears they've only got one brigade here. They're in the woods though, and we're down to 4 minutes, so we're almost out of time. I think what we're gonna have to do is just start having these guys charge, because we're not gonna break a brigade of 900 men that is located in probably 99% cover. So instead, I'm just gonna get as many troops in toward this last flag, this last objective, in the last 4 minutes that we have here. You can see here the timer's about to run out. It's down to 0. The flag still shows Union, but the Union troops there are retreating, and there it's shifted over. The Confederates secure West Malvern Hill. The battle is over. We win the victory. We lost 15,000 men out of our 44,000, so not even close to the 55% cutoff there. We would have had to lose about 20,000 men, about 5,000 men more an extra 30%. The enemy lost more, but not much. This was one of those close run battles in terms of casualties. As the Confederacy, we lost probably a lot more than we should have. This was a bloody victory, probably not a Pyrrhic victory. We're not to the point where we can't recover, but certainly a bloody victory that we probably should have tried to be a bit more careful of, but we were fighting the battle on hyper speed, at least that mentality, certainly the first phase of the battle. Meanwhile, just scrolling through our captured equipment, we captured a good deal of artillery, more than 26 guns, less so on the sidearms, but we captured some. The federal troops still don't seem to be terribly well armored or armed. You can see there we got $187,000 and some 10,000 plus recruits to replace our losses. We've got 23,000 recruits in reserve, 15,000 casualties to replace. We also were given General James Longstreet as a premium commander. So that will be useful. We'll put him in charge of one of our divisions. We'll have to do quite a bit of reorganizing of the force. Meanwhile, what I'm doing here in front of you is I'm rebuilding the force, and I am focusing on making sure that if I have a 2-star brigade, it stays a 2-star brigade. If I have a 1-star brigade, it stays a 1-star brigade. So basically what that means is I reinforce the unit up until the point that one additional man, or roughly that many, just a handful of men, will drop it from 2-star to 1-star, and then I switch over from rookie to veterans. So replace on rookies until you're about to lose the sort of extra experience, that second trait, and then switch over to switch over to veterans, pay the extra money, but ensure that you keep the quality of the unit. It's a little bit more complex than that. You've got the traits in the sort of center of the screen here that definitely go down no matter what if you're replacing with rookies. Even if you don't lose that star level or that extra bonus, but that's sort of my guiding principle for issuing reinforcements. You can see here our cavalry brigade under Hanson didn't engage the enemy at all. They were kind of left in the rear in that last fight, but I'm getting all my troops up to snuff here. In that first corps its losses are replaced. But now we're moving on to the second corps under Albert Sidney Johnson. It also lost a lot of men, but it doesn't have any 2-star brigades, so because of that, we're just going pretty much across the board with all rookie replacements. In addition to that, we do have some excess sidearms, or not sidearms, but main battle rifles. However, we don't have enough 1842s to replace all of our casualties here. Once we've gotten down to the last division, we don't have enough guns for Haney's brigade in the 3rd Division in the 2nd Corps. So we'll go ahead and we'll swap them over to some Harper's Ferry rifles that we have in stock. Over 3,000 of those available, or over 2,000, sorry. So we can go ahead and use those to equip Haney for free, more or less, almost. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to max out our artillery batteries. I know I've been told a couple of times from people that any battery over 16 guns starts to lose effectiveness, but I'm not really a min-maxer, and I like the idea of a maximum size artillery battery. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and upgrade all of these artillery batteries to 24 guns to give us a larger punch with our artillery. Even if I lose some efficiency, I don't want to waste a potential 2,000 plus man infantry brigade on 24 guns. So that's kind of my other logic there is, am I less efficient per gun? Maybe, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure that I've got the most guns I can with using the least number of units to get that firepower in effect. Additionally, you can see here one other thing that helps artillery is if you've got an adequate commander. Generally the 24-gun batteries require a quasi-division commander to accomplish that. But we're kind of coming to the close here of this particular video. We've won the Battle of Malvern Hill, not decisively, but we won it, and we're now reorganizing our army. Ideally, every brigade has a brigadier general, including our 24-gun batteries of artillery. This is going to be the point where people start gaining experience really rapidly and dramatically making things look funny, where you have lieutenant generals in charge of brigades. But we're not quite there yet. We'll use all of our career points that we earned in that last battle on medicine, so our casualties are less impactful because you get more walking wounded back, guys you don't have to spend money on replacing. And then we're going to go ahead and go through all of these brigades and make sure that we have all of our most senior people in charge. With that being said, as we come close to wrapping up here, we are in the Second Manassas campaign, so the next battle that comes will be the Battle of Second Manassas, the next major battle anyway, which is an interesting fight. I fought it once before and was overwhelmed and lost, and I think that's where I got fired in the Confederate. No, I made it to Antietam. But I remember that battle was incredibly difficult. The enemy charged you like crazy in bonsai charges. Despite your tough defenses, it was very hard to hold against the Yankee hordes. It'll be interesting to see if this is different, because that sort of charge frequency has been reduced on the enemy side, so it's a little bit less melee heavy than it was originally. So we'll see how that all plays out in the upcoming Second Manassas campaign. We have 2 minor battles to fight first before we get to Second Manassas. But we've built out our 1st and 2nd Corps to full strength. We still have 8,400 soldiers in reserve, so we could start working on a 3rd Corps, which will probably come in handy in the not too distant future. For the moment, we'll keep those troops in reserve, and we'll start working toward just kind of increasing the quality of the troops we have, making sure all of our best commanders are in the best places possible, and upgrading all our weapons as much as possible. I've already purchased some Enfields and upgraded 1 unit. I'm not going to get enough money to upgrade another unit, and I'm not going to sell the useful weapons that I have, but I will end up using some reputation to get 2 new brigadier generals, General Pickett, and I can't remember who the other one was. But anyway, with that being said, guys, I am going to go ahead and cut this video off. I hope you enjoyed it, even without the gameplay audio, and thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, as always, and I'm out.